Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast. I'm Terry, the creator and co-host of this podcast. I've lived with depression most of my life, and I know how easy it can be to feel all alone in the experience. I'm not alone, and you aren't either.
And I'm Dr. Anita Sands, a licensed clinical psychologist with a number of my own diagnoses, all of which bring a certain amount of anxiety and depression along with them. There is great power in shared experiences. We share our own as we engage in intimate and candid conversations with our weekly guests, exploring different perspectives on and experiences with depression.
We keep it real because depression is real. We keep it hopeful because there truly is hope, in spite of what depression tells you.
Hi, Terry.
Hello, Anita. So, a few weeks ago we did a different than usual episode, which was both longer and more in-depth. It was a deep dive into suicidal thoughts, what they're like, where they can lead, and how to protect yourself if you have them. It was called Why You Have to Tell Someone If You're Suicidal. We got a lot of feedback about it, mostly in response to an audio clip that we posted on social media about the need to run, not walk, to tell someone if your depression leads you to believe that the people in your life would be better off without you.
Some comments illustrate reasons that people do not share that they're suicidal. For example, Rachel wrote, "If you tell, they will either try to stop you or tell you to get on with it. Neither things I want to hear." And we're going to both talk about that kind of response and produce a future episode about the realities that can accompany reaching out for help. But following up on some other feedback, Mark commented, "There is something strange about this condition that makes people unsure if they even want help. Thank you for caring about those in such tough circumstances." And Katie, the guest in the episode, said, "I didn't realize that depression told lies, as you worded it. When I started to feel that I was becoming depressed, I listened to the podcast again, and I noted the lies, and I was able to combat them with the techniques you guys shared, especially the one where you talked about, what would you say if your loved one said that they're a burden?"
Isn't that interesting to have the guest reach back out? I thought that was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And we also heard the question, how? Everyone says and hears, reach out if you're struggling. But that can be nearly impossible when you're completely depleted and quite possibly feeling like no one would understand or care. And coming up with the right words or the right ask can also be a challenge. And that is why we are revisiting 2 episodes that offer specific language that you can use anywhere on the I need some support spectrum, from when things start getting really hard to when you're in crisis. Our guest again is Sam Dylan Finch, who among other things writes the blog Let's Queer Things Up. Years ago, he wrote a list of 10 doable ways to reach out when you're struggling with your mental health. Today we'll discuss the first 5 tips, and then next week we'll dive into the other 5, so we can take our time with each of them. A note that this interview was originally recorded for an episode sponsored by a grant from the Charles E. Kubley Foundation. Here now is Sam Dylan Finch, giving his voice to depression. Sam is a mental health writer. He freely and articulately shares about his challenges in articles that stress the importance of vulnerability, defying stigma, speaking up, and speaking out. So when his close friend died by suicide earlier the year we spoke, he was gutted.
I guess I kind of thought, as a mental health advocate, as someone who's really public about what I've struggled with, I had always just assumed that people close to me would just magically know that they could reach out to me.
But in the time following that loss, Sam realized something that helped him better understand.
I found myself becoming really, really caught up in that grief and finding myself having my own thoughts of suicide. I'm an attempt survivor, so suicidality is nothing new to me. But I found myself in those few weeks not really asking for help either. And I started to wonder, why did I find it so difficult? And why did I place this expectation on my friend to reach out when I was having a hard time doing the same thing?
It is so easy to say, let the experts handle it. That's what mental health professionals are for. But they're not always a timely option.
Honestly, our loved ones are usually the first line of defense when someone's struggling with their mental health, because we have a mental health system, at least in the US, where trying to get any kind of therapy or psychiatry appointment can be a really, really lengthy and difficult process. So if we're waiting on clinicians to be the ones that are able to step in, we're waiting far, far too long for folks who need help sooner rather than later.
So Sam used his grief and perspective to write a list that he wishes both he and his friend had had. Sam writes, I don't know if an article like this could have saved my friend, but what I do know is that we need to normalize asking for help and talking about what that might look like, rather than just pretending it's a simple and intuitive thing to do. So if you're struggling and need some help, here are some specific ways to ask for it. The first suggestion on Sam's list is to say, I'm, fill in the blank, whatever you are, depressed, anxious, suicidal, and I'm not sure what to ask for, but I don't want to be alone.
Sometimes the biggest obstacle is that people really don't know what they need. And the expectation that people should when they're in such a dark space is really like asking someone who doesn't know how to swim, like you throw them in the water and you're like, I don't know, just swim. And so allowing people to just name that, to say, I don't know what I need, and to just express, like, I'm not sure what to ask for, but I do know that I don't want to do this alone, can be really, really powerful in letting loved ones know, yeah, I'm a little lost right now, but just having you here with me is important to me.
It's actually beautiful.
Mm.
If someone said that to me, I would so be there, and I could see myself saying it to someone, but I never in my entire life have.
Right, and we don't see it modeled. I can't think of a time when someone said that to me, but I do know that if someone did, I would be there in a heartbeat. I think it's just finding those words can be so difficult.
Thankfully, Sam is giving us those words today. A second way to reach out is to say, I'm struggling with my mental health, and what I've been trying isn't working. Can we, again, then ask for specifically what you need? Can we meet up? Can we Skype? Or whatever, on a specific date to come up with a better plan?
This one I knew had to be on the list just because the system is still so complicated. And I've watched so many people that I love try to figure it out when it's too late, when they're already so depressed and things are just so dysfunctional that asking them to make phone call after phone call, set up appointments, figure out meal plans, or even like trying to figure out how to get an apartment clean. There are like so many little things that have to be put together like a puzzle to really get any kind of progress going, that I realize that there's no reason why that can't be a team approach.
And Sam says setting a specific time to team up is key.
That's so important. Setting a specific time, I think, performs a couple of functions. The first is so that the person you're talking to understands that this isn't something you're asking for a month from now or like whenever, that it's an urgent ask, that the stakes are there, that people understand that this is important. And also I think it's helpful for the person who's struggling to just know, like, okay, things are really cruddy right now, but I do know that on Wednesday night I'm meeting up with X friend and we're going to come up with a plan. It makes it a little bit easier to hang in there because you know that there's a point in the future in which there's going to be some kind of progress made.
Number 3, I don't feel safe by myself right now. Can you stay on the phone with me or come over until I calm down?
I think most people find it really difficult to say, I don't feel safe right now. But it's also a really important moment to reach out and just figuring out how to assemble those words together. The reason I kind of framed it the way that I did was because I wanted people to understand the urgency, so loved ones should know that you don't feel safe. But also giving a direct ask, can you stay on the phone with me, or can you come over until I calm down, helps people understand, like, this is what I need right now. rather than just saying, like, I don't feel safe, fix it, because not everyone is really equipped to deal with a crisis. I think that's a direct enough ask that people feel more empowered to be able to help because they're not just being thrown into a situation where they don't know what to do.
Sam's fourth suggestion for reaching out is to say, I'm in a bad place, but I'm not ready to talk about it. Can you help me distract myself?
I think there's this misconception that you shouldn't ask for help if you don't want to talk about what you're going through. But what that often means is, I think of the like leaky pipe in the basement analogy, where people wait until their basement is flooded before they actually get help, as opposed to like fixing things where they start. In a similar way, like if you're not ready to talk about whatever's bothering you, or if in general you just tend to be a more private person, there really should be some kind of language available to people that articulate that.
This is such important and unfamiliar language that we asked Sam to elaborate.
You do not have to be ready to talk about your trauma or your suicidality to be able to reach out to someone and get some support. It's okay to say, I'm not ready, but I would like some kind of distraction or some kind of support or some kind of connection that helps me, at least in this moment, deal with what I'm dealing with.
And those distractions will be as individual as the person asking. We've heard from a number of our podcast guests that something that occupies your mind without stressing it is ideal, whether that's watching an engaging show, doing a puzzle, or playing a game. Sam cautions against thinking of whatever it is as something to make you happy, which he says may be unrealistic under the circumstances.
Because obviously if you're depressed, you might think, oh, I shouldn't even bother with self-care. Nothing's going to make me happy. But when you realize that nourishing yourself, or, you know, whatever synonym there works for you, whether it's moving towards wellness or doing something that is caring, a caring gesture towards yourself, that's like a much more pragmatic goal to have in mind. I think a lot of the language around self-care doesn't necessarily serve people who have pervasive mental health problems that, like, let's be real, you can't always just like perk yourself up by doing some yoga. So it's nice to have a different framework, as much as I love yoga.
Mm-hmm. And Sam's last tip for this episode, number 5, is to say, can you check in on me on a specific day, or every day if you need it, just to make sure I'm all right? He says, if you take nothing else away from these tips today, it should be to ask people to check in on you.
One thing that intimidates people when they're thinking about reaching out for help is that they don't want to ask too much of people. So it can be anything from send me a selfie every day just to check in. It'd be nice to see your face. Or let's text each other every morning or every evening to see, you know, what our plans are, or how we're going to take care of ourselves. Or it doesn't even have to be a big dramatic thing.
And the response to the check-in doesn't have to be a big dramatic thing either.
Even if it's as simple as just saying, like, I'm sad, that's how my day's going. Because even that gives you some element of being seen. And I think that's a big part of what makes a mental health crisis so toxic, is day in and day out of not being seen and not being recognized when you're struggling really can be its own kind of source of trauma, because you start to feel invisible.
And there's another huge and valuable benefit to the check-in.
In the article, I describe it as like buckling your seatbelt when you get into a car. It's like one extra line of defense if things do start to get really difficult. People won't hear about it at the last possible minute. They'll have a sense of what's coming because you've been checking in with them, hopefully, and staying connected. And sustaining a connection is such a big part of staying mentally well, or at least survival. Isolating yourself is really one of the worst things you can do, I think, in a mental health crisis.
So, Terry, my biggest takeaways from what Sam talked about, the first one is that you don't actually have to know what to say or what you need in order to reach out to someone. That was really helpful.
Absolutely. It's the exact same thing I was going to say.
I love that he said you can literally say, I'm not in a good place, but I'm not sure what to ask for, or I don't want to be alone, but I'm not sure what I need, or I'm not in a good place, but I'm not ready to talk about it. Could you help me, distract myself? I just think that's a wonderful way of asking for help without having to get into details or to think that I'm not allowed to ask if I don't know. If I don't know what I'm feeling, what I want, what I need.
Right? And it can be so hard to know. I'm going to read you what he originally wrote to that very point in the blog because he worded it a little differently than in the interview. He said, you don't have to talk about what's bothering you if you're not ready. Opening up a whole can of worms might not be the safest thing for you in that particular moment. And guess what? You can still reach out for help. He says, sometimes we just need to shoot the shit with someone so we aren't stuck in our heads making ourselves a little crazy. This is a valid and healthy thing to ask for. And it's a subtle way of making folks aware that you're having a rough time without needing to go into detail. And the sooner the folks around you are aware that you're having a hard time, the quicker they can show up to help you through it.
Right. And I think this makes so much sense, especially because he said that our loved ones are usually the first line of defense. You know, they're the first ones we're likely going to reach out to ask for help, as opposed to the wait involved sometimes to see your psychiatrist or your therapist. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that what Sam is recommending that people ask for from their friends or their family is not like therapy.
Right.
You know, you don't have to lay it all out. You could just say, can you come over and watch a movie with me? You know, can you come over and help me, you know, take care of this stack of dishes? You know, something that it's like, that's not therapy, but you probably, aren't in a good place if you're feeling that way to get into all of that with someone. And maybe it's not great to unpack all of that with a non-professional. It could overwhelm them. They could end up saying things that are unhelpful. I just think it makes so much sense to ask for what's more likely to be possible for that person to give comfortably.
Agreed. And these 1 through 5 of the 10 suggestions that he makes are sort of higher up on the spectrum where it's before you're in a crisis. And I cannot emphasize enough from my own personal experience and from all the guests I've talked to, and you well know this as a therapist, that the earlier we get regrounded, the earlier we connect with somebody and feel some support, that can prevent us from sliding down to where it actually becomes a crisis. We often talk about upstream suicide prevention. And these are earlier. And so the more of these we can implement, hopefully, the less of the ones we're going to need that we're talking about next week are when it's into the, you know, hey, I am in trouble here. I'm not safe.
Yes. This reminds me of the episode with Rosaline when she was talking about what was the most powerful thing in that, that dark night that she was having. And it was actually emojis, little heart emojis. And so again, something really, really small at the perfect time is the exact right thing. So just texting somebody and saying, hey, I'm feeling kind of down right now. Can you send me something that would make me smile right now? Something really small like that is not really small when you're really struggling, because what you need to kind of help you feel like, all right, I can get through today and, tomorrow might actually be better, could be something as small as that heart emoji or a kitten meme, When
I hear that, I know if I was in a really bad place, I'd roll my eyes and think, oh, a kitten meme. But I have a very close friend who I can always tell when something's up, and she will sort of say, what's up? And within, a text, she has shifted to sending me something that she thinks is funny. And I know that she just wanted me to know, and what she wants is something funny, something distracting, something else. And she also knows, and I know, if she needed to come back to, no, hey, I need something a lot more than that, she'd say it and I'd respond. But in that moment, that's what she needs. She needs somebody to say, I heard you, I'm here, and let's lighten this up a little bit if that's what you need.
Right. It's not a little thing. That's really the point. It could be everything that you need in the moment.
So next week, we are going to look at Sam's number 6 through 10 suggestions. And again, those are for further down when things are getting worse and worse. And the hope is to not get there, but we do. So these are specific language, specific asks for that end of the mental health spectrum, including crisis.
We truly hope that our podcast brings a little more understanding, helps you better articulate and reflect on your own experience with depression, or better understand how to support someone else who is struggling.
If this episode has been of comfort or value to you, know that there are hundreds of others like it in our archive, which you can easily find at our website, givingvoicetodepression.com. And remember, if you're struggling, speak up, even if it's hard. If someone else is struggling, take the time to listen